What is small bay flex and how did it become all the rage in commercial real estate? And what does it mean when you say doors, not docks? This week on Stories Behind the Door, we've got the Director of Acquisitions for Doors and Spaces, RJ Fischer. Oh, so excited for today's episode with this guy. Before I dive in with RJ, I got to give a shout out to my folks at Kiwi 2 Construction. They have been the leaders in steel for self-storage and small bay flex for over 30 years now. We got to see them out at the Self-Storage Association show in Vegas. Unfortunately, my guy Wayne Woosley was not there. We're looking forward to him. Wayne saying a prayer for you, hoping everything's going well, and really thankful to have them as sponsors of the podcast. Coming back to my guy, RJ, first and foremost, really excited to actually connect with you because although we've been kind of LinkedIn buddies and we've talked to each other cursorily, I haven't really had a chance to just sit down with you and talk small bay flex. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I feel like it's people like you who are putting out content, the Discover Small Bay Flex events and kind of getting the people all together, exchanging information is huge for the asset class. And we feel we're at the infancy and we're excited for things to come.
I'm so looking forward to it. We're going to talk a lot because you guys have a really cool event coming up on October 16th, and we'll get into that, and we'll get what I mean when I say you guys because you work with Brian Whitmer, who's been on the podcast before. We're excited to dig into the whole Doors and Spaces deal. The podcast always starts off with the same question, though, whether it's self-storage. In this instance, obviously, we're talking small bay flex. They're such unique asset classes. They're so niche. Nobody sets out to end up in this asset class. So I want to hear the story of RJ Fischer and how you ended up getting so heavily involved in small bay industrial flex.
Right. So, I have an appraisal background and I had this one assignment where I got this small bay park and it was this daughter who inherited the park from her parents. And the parents owned it for a long time. Their tenants always paid rent on time and no one left. And, it was time to value it, and the daughter had no interest in keeping it. So I went online and I started doing some research about how to value the property. And I really couldn't find anything. And, I was speaking to people and not much. And then I was driving back home one day and I came upon a small bay park that was very similar. And it was getting rents in the mid-teens. Same product, but different outcome. And it just gave me the idea to think how little information is available, that once this information becomes standardized and more capital starts to come in, just the opportunity that this asset class presents. So Brian and I connected and we both geek out about this. And now this is, we're 2 feet in this boat and doing this full time.
You mentioned Brian Whitmer, Doors and Spaces. You're the vice president or the director, of acquisitions for Doors and Spaces. Brian was with me on the podcast, also in the Discovering Small Bay Flex events, presented a lot of what you guys are looking to do. My favorite part of small bay flex is how hard it is to comp markets, quite frankly. So when you go out and you say, okay, this one person is at X dollars, the other person's at like 2X, and it's the same product. As somebody involved in appraisal and involved in real estate, how exciting is that when you see a market that is that all over the place?
It's very exciting. Historically, these buildings are older. I was doing some research I do a weekly post every Sunday called Small Bay Sundays. And, I saw that the average building is built in 1976. So it's almost 50 years old. And now we're kind of seeing a product from the 1970s that has the demand for 2025. And it's just starting to pencil for for people to build these projects. And it's very important for them to be an infill location. So as rents start to rise into the mid-teens, it's a very exciting time for the asset class.
And I'm going to ask this question, and how crazy is it that in this small bay flex play, I almost don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk too much about it on the podcast because I don't want to spread the word too quickly. But you know what? You and I are of the same opinion. Spread the word. Go do it. But it boggles my mind because you're in North Jersey. I'm in South Jersey. I'm looking all over the country. When you look at this product that, as you said, is built in the 1970s, and it's getting rates that if I underwrite a new development, I can pencil a brand new building using the 1970 product, the rates from that product. And listen, it's fair to say that if I go build a brand new building and I make a Class A facility and it's got bells and whistles on it, one would hope I'm going to get a premium over that 1970s facility. But the reality is, and you mentioned it, the rates are getting so good on those old products, you can pencil a new build without even factoring in an improved rate.
Right. And, with the growth in e-commerce, and we kind of view Small Bay as the home of small businesses. And we always joke about it's, when your wife finally had enough of the crap around the house and it's like, all right, you got to go out and get a space, our space fits it perfectly. And, it's just, it's an exciting time, and we feel that demand is stronger now than ever. We're starting to, it's very, the information's very fragmented. We feel as institutions start to come in, the information will become more available. So we feel it's kind of just a race to these mom and pop facilities and trying to find them and, service the people in the industry.
I'm interested to know for you guys, are you looking at doing more ground up development? Are you looking at acquiring existing assets in the space? What's the strategy for Doors and Spaces?
So the strategy for Doors and Spaces is, we like to really lean on brokers. When we come into a market, I do my best for research, and we like to speak to brokers who are kind of like the gatekeepers for the leasing and sales data, because a lot of this isn't done on traditional real estate websites. A lot of it's done by word of mouth. And, we like to go into a market and kind of cluster assets together. So you could have, one property manager kind of handling 5 properties rather than 5 property managers handling one property in different locations. Yep. So we like to go in and into a market, we care about last mile delivery. We care about, the demand and, so like when we find an area that we like, we try to, get a couple properties and really hone in on it.
How much of a difference is there between going and purchasing an existing asset versus maybe trying to find a piece of raw land and develop something in the market? How does that play into your overall strategy?
So, when a lot of people were concerned what was going on with tariffs, and small bays seem to prove resilient during downturns. People still need to go to work, and these tradespeople still need to service their clients. So I would say that, building small bay has been a big strategy of ours. One of our partners grew up in one of the largest HVAC companies in New York State. Yep. And it's given us the ability to kind of build efficiently. We get all of our product, we get our metal panels from a certain place, and then it's really just figuring out the site work and figuring out how all the numbers play out to really do well with our returns. We have different investors who have different tolerance risks, and we try and do a pretty equal balance of value add and development. That's kind of what we have going on.
Love it. And of course, that strategy then allows you to get into a market and have a couple products there before you open a new development. And to your point, right, the efficiency of scale, if you have one product in a market, the cost of operating it goes up because you're going to need to have somebody going by every once in a while to check what's going on.
Exactly. And, what we've also liked about the product is kind of the stickiness of the tenants. Yeah. There's not too many places to go. It's been like 0.3% of all construction right now is small bay. Yeah. So these tenants will put in a lot of money into their spaces, and, people are concerned about the credit sometimes. The credit is the blood, sweat, and tears, and, paying off the mortgage and using this money to send your kid to college. So, we really like the tenant base. We like how diverse it is. And, there's so many different advantages to this asset class.
I'm going to go back a little bit because you talked about getting involved with local brokers. Obviously, Brian Whitmer comes from the brokerage world. He's been a very successful broker in northern New Jersey for many, many years. I'm interested to get your thoughts because I've certainly run into this. You try and go do some research on a market yourself. And as you said, a lot of these things trade owner to tenant with nobody ever knowing about it, right? It's not like CoStar has great detail on, the typical, data platforms you're going to get leasing comps on for big box industrial or for storage or for office or those other commercial real estate asset classes. Small Bay Flex doesn't really trade this way. So I'm interested to get your take. How often when you call a broker in a local market that you're looking at, are you just blown away by what they tell you the rates are versus what you may have found when you're trying to go online and research?
That's a great question. What I love to do is I love to research. I will dive in and, sometimes I have to limit myself to the rabbit hole that I'll go down going into a market. So, I'll kind of evaluate a market from my desktop and get an idea of what I kind of think. But, you could only do so much from behind a computer screen. You try to use the numbers to tell a story, and then you'll go and speak to a broker and just pick his brain. Just be like, what are you seeing? We feel that brokers are kind of extremely valuable in this space, and you'll be able to compare notes. And the best part about Small Bay, we feel, is how people are really open to sharing information, not just brokers, operators as well. They like to, speak about what they're saying. And some people are like, okay, well, you're giving away competitive advantage. Sharing information is what's going to make this space work and help appraisers understand how to value them and help lenders understand how to underwrite them. So sharing is actually key in this asset class.
I talked to you offline. I just got back from the Self Storage Association 50th anniversary. A friend of mine, Mike Burnham from Storage Mart, the president of the largest privately owned REIT in the industry, big proponent of sharing information. That does not happen across the board with the publicly traded REITs and storage. I was talking about the hotel industry, which has started to share achieved rates in hotels publicly, and they've actually seen rates go up since they started doing that. The exact opposite of what many would think has happened, whereas the storage for the last few years, we've seen oversaturation in a lot of markets, and rates have been compressed since the end of COVID. Since a lot of the COVID restrictions that really helped storage have ended, we've seen rates go down. So to your point, this idea of sharing information, especially in what I would call a nascent asset class where you still don't have a wide range of banking options, you're still trying to convince equity to come into the space, the more information you can gather, the better.
Totally. And if you don't mind, that kind of leads me right into this Small Bay Summit that we're putting together. I feel it's kind of tied in with sharing information. And this,
by the way, I'm going to cut you off because we're teasing the viewers right now with the link to the Small Bay Summit, but you're going to let them know why that's a tease as you go in. I'll let you finish.
Yes, we're just super excited about it. So, just from our different conversations, I got together with Lee Sager from Camps Bay Capital, and we're like, what if we got all, just a couple people together in a room and exchange facts, and information is key. And what turned in from just a couple of people, we picked a venue with 180 people. We weren't exactly sure the interest we're going to get, and it's totally sold out. We have senior people at banks reaching out to come, and we apologize, but there's been a lot of demand for this, so it's just something we're very excited about. Small Bay List is a leading publication for everything Small Bay. They've been helping a lot by compiling sales data and lease data, and they put out a daily newsletter on everything that's going on. And Camps Bay Capital is, these guys have decades of experience in this space. They work with debt and equity and kind of understand what these players are looking for coming into this space. So we're just really excited to put this together.
I can't tell you, like, when I go out to SSA now, obviously I make a lot of LinkedIn posts about Small Bay. I ran the Discovering Small Bay Flex events, in February and April. So I go out to these Self-Storage Association events now, and every time someone comes up and talks to me about Small Bay Industrial, it's amazing the level of interest that's come on this asset class. And by the way, not just small people that are looking to maybe do a little bit of small bay flex on a maybe they've got a parcel of land next to a self-storage. That definitely happens. But I'm talking some of the big private equity folks that are involved in self-storage that are really getting interested in this asset class. What do you think it is about small bay flex today that's really attracting so much attention?
I think it's it's kind of like the buzzword. Small bay flex, kind of like the buzzword these days. People are starting to get interested. People are starting to share, okay, why is this the right asset class to go into? It with time, it's kind of an opportunity. And in speaking to people and understanding why they're excited about this event, we're excited about our panels. We're getting brokers from all over the country to speak about what they're seeing with leasing and sales data you really can't get online. We have capital markets players who are sharing, how they're underwriting this. Yeah. And we have operators from some of the largest national companies who are showing, how to buy, build, and grow this thing. So, the time's now, and, maybe in 10 to 15 years when institutions start to get involved and cap rates are compressed, it'll be fine, because we'll look back on this podcast and we'll say that, we were kind of in this and we're flying our flags. And I think that's why people are very excited about this, kind of just seeing, we're having BKM Capital Partners as our keynote speaker. They had a big joint venture, and it was just a big joint venture just to go out and buy small bay flex. And that was a big validation to us on the ground sponsors who feel like this asset class is going big places. So,
yeah, to your point, you talk about big equity coming in and compressing cap rates 10, 15 years. I can tell you I had a conversation. I'm going to humble brag here a little bit. We were literally standing on the 50-yard line of Allegiant Stadium where the Raiders play. There was a big event. Darius Rucker came and sang at the SSA show, and I was speaking to the VP of development for one of the largest private equity groups in the country. They do a lot of industrial as well as a ton of self-storage. Right now they're raising a $3 billion fund. And when I mentioned small bay industrial flex, it was instant perk. And hey, we want to talk. So this idea that it's 10, 15 years down the road, honestly, RJ, I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's going to be 10 or 15 years. I think right now, and if I had to guess, I think the numbers we're underwriting exit cap rates to on a 5-year project, we're right now underwriting to a 6.5 cap on most of our deals, which we thought maybe was a little aggressive. But the more I talk to people, the more that people are like, that's not too aggressive at all. You're seeing that infusion of big equity that's really starting to get excited about this asset class.
Yeah, for sure. And also, we kind of view it as the apartments of industrial. Us at Doors and Spaces, we all have multifamily backgrounds. Yeah. And, we've seen vacancy rates under 5%. And that's with, the main leasing channels to be Facebook Marketplace. You have a lot of, spam over there. And it's like, once these start to really pick up on traditional real estate websites, I can't imagine where this is going to grow to. So
I love that. I think the worst market I've seen under, you guys obviously are close with Cody Payne as well, the team out of Flex Parks USA down in Dallas. I think Michael Tran's going to be up at the event with us. They do something called the World Engine Report. And the worst one I've ever seen was still under 5%, a vacancy in a market, right? That's a market study. So like to your point, the lack of construction and the lack of new build in this asset class has created is the window going to last forever? No, it's not. It's going to come and get filled. But there's a window right now that I think is going to be a really strong one for a bunch of people. I wanted to go back a little bit because you talk about small bay, and there's a bunch of different ways that small bay can look, right? And you mentioned that earlier, like 0.3% of all commercial construction is small bay. Some of that is what you might consider shallow bay, where you have dock high doors and they're really going towards, third-party logistics companies, not just last mile. You guys have a very specific design style for Doors and Spaces. One of the things that jumped out at me when Brian was on the events, You guys really know what you want to build and you're sticking to a very specific model. Talk to me a little bit about what that model looks like and why you've been so specific in what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so we kind of have a clear picture about what we're trying to do in the way that we're doors, not docks. We're vans, not trucks. So, we're trying to build a brand. We're trying to build 40, 50, 60 of these things that feel the same, look the same, act the same. And whether it's, in New York or whether it's in Florida, people are going to know our property. So, we've seen this type of success in self-storage. And we try to keep a very narrow focus and try to be the best at what we do. So when people, come to our property, they know what to expect. They know it's going to be a functional property, and they're going to know that's doors and spaces. So, we're trying to, there's always the shiny object that's out there, and it's easy to chase that. But just when you try and have a focus and you have people who are on the same page, that's where we feel that where our strength really comes in.
I love that. And what really kind of led to that decision to avoid the dock high doors, right? To avoid having 18 wheelers come through the park and instead concentrate on, panel vans and roll up doors where you can drive a truck into the facility.
Right. I mean, it's just, I guess, I guess it's the product type that we're interested in. Kind of what we got started on. When we first started to come into this space, we came into these types where it was more doors, not docks, and that's just kind of what we've learned about and what we feel will give us the best opportunity for success. So we've just kind of stuck to that.
I love it. I'm going to take a little bit of a right turn here because as I'm doing my research to have you on the podcast, something that jumped out at me, you spent a lot of time in New York City going to school, right? First Baruch College, then you went to Stern School of Business. For those that don't know, NYU, one of the top places you can be to get a business education. Tell me a little bit about your experience in New York City, being in school for so long in the city, and how that's played out as you've jumped into this career in Small Bay Flex.
Totally. So I grew up playing baseball, and it was always a dream of mine to play in college. And, I knew I wasn't going to play professionally, but, it's something that was important to me. And I know that you have a little MMA background of yourself. So I've always thought that it's given me a lot of tools to succeed in the work world and, being an athlete and being able to play sports in college. And one of the reasons I picked Baruch was because of the real estate track. And one of the reasons I went and took classes at NYU was because of the professors that they had. And I feel like, questions are key and just being able to listen rather than speak. And I would speak to them about what asset classes they were excited about and try not to get the cookie cutter answer, but really understand why they were doing what they're doing. And I had this professor who was telling me kind of about, these big Amazon buildings, 1 million square feet, that was really all the rage at the time. And now, then people started going to the 500,000 square foot buildings and the 250,000 square foot buildings. And he thought that there was really an opportunity here. And, as I said, I like to do research. I was looking into it and I find myself to be good at research, couldn't find much. So I'm like, okay, there might be something going on here. So that's when I kind of fully, wanted to dive into it. I've been interested in it for many years. And in the last couple of years, I've taken the turn to spend all my time on it.
All right, two questions we're going to get into here. I'd be remiss if not asking you about your baseball career. What position did you play? What was it about baseball that you love so much?
I pitched. I was a short pitcher. Wish I
I
was a
love it.
lefty, wish I had some height, but now we're on to bigger, better things in real estate. So I pitched and I played third base. Something cool to me is that, on a personal side, is that a lot of these training facilities and gyms that I grew up playing in, at first they were in a lot of strip malls, and then they moved to small bay warehouses.
Isn't that incredible?
And my sister danced, and she started having the same transition.
Yeah.
So I was actually into this space, at least curious about it from the time I was 15 years old. So it's cool to be able to come and do this full time.
You mentioned my martial arts career, so I'll bring this up as a frame of reference. We're talking about a 1,500 square foot facility in North Jersey. Maybe it's $3,000 a month for an owner to rent that facility, a little more than $20 a square foot all in, maybe $25 a square foot all in. And that seems like an astronomical number, right? Well, I was running a martial arts school that was 3,000 square feet in 2011, and I was paying $8,600 a month in rent, right? So this idea that it's a small business can't afford to rent these spaces, as we've seen 5 years ago, $8, $9, $10. Now you're seeing 15, 18, 20 in some markets for these small bay flex spaces. To your point, you've seen people moving out of those commercial retail centers, the class A commercial retail, because nowadays, and I'll get into this a little bit with your generation, you don't need it to be in the main shopping center to find it. I'm going to ask a question that I wanted to ask you a little bit about anyway today. And shockingly, we've got like 4 minutes left in my half hour that I set aside.
Man.
We might go a couple minutes over if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you. You talked about research and about, something you found yourself good at, digging in. How is AI starting to play a role for you now in what you guys are doing and how you're developing this strategy with Doors and Spaces?
Good. Yes.
You can tell me good question. I'll take that all day, every day. I have no problem with that.
I love speaking about this. Well, just to first touch back on one more thing on your last point, I believe that a big reason for this change is, the ability to Google different places in the area. You used to need that visibility. You used to need people to be able to see your space, be like, okay, maybe I'll go over there. And I've seen just, if I go to Florida and when I was still playing and I want to find a space to train, just look up a space and I'd be able to find it. So, also with, to lead into your question about AI, I really believe we're at the iPhone 1 stage of AI. I think we're just getting started. And it's interesting with commercial real estate how, you kind of have 20% of the people doing 80% of the deals. And people are stuck in their ways, and they've had a lot of success. But that's why I believe that commercial real estate's been one of the last sectors to really accept it. Yeah. With AI, I think there's a bunch of ways that could help your portfolio. Just speaking personally, how it could help us grow our portfolio. Working with a lean team, you're able to get a lot more done. I think your robots are just as good as the questions that you ask them. Yeah. You're able to train a model, I call it small base scout, and I'll tell it exactly, what we're looking for. And, when we get a deal, kind of run it through it, and it's definitely not gospel. And I know that it can make mistakes. I think you really got to be careful with that. And we treat it as kind of like a junior analyst. It's a good first screen. And, if we feel that there's a reason to pay more attention to something, then we'll start to dive into it ourselves. So just, another thing that I like to do is use AI to find, as a research buff, use AI to find different articles. If I go into a market, I'll try and understand, what are the recent sales in this asset class? What are the recent market reports? What are, it could go anywhere you want. I think I don't think AI is going to replace people's jobs. I think the people who know how to use AI will be better off.
I say that to everyone. I say you're not going to lose your job to AI. You lose your job to somebody else who's utilizing AI better than you are, right? And I'm of course 51, about to be 52 in a few days, and so it's a challenge for me. It's overwhelming, right? I was like, I don't know, 34 years old, 35 years old when iPhone 1 came out, so I was ancient when that happened, and so to see this technological shift is incredible to me. I think about, and I'll share this story. My grandfather was born in 1897, right? He was like in his late 70s when I was born. He had my father very late in life. My father had me late in life. In 1995, when he was on his deathbed, he told his kids he saw more innovation in the last year of his life than he saw in the first 97 years of his life. And I always found that fascinating because and of course you weren't even around in 1995, so we're going way back. But to think about the difference now versus 1995 and the innovation we're living in and how rapidly it's improving, you really better keep up or you're going to get left behind. And you know, I'm a capitalist at heart and a libertarian. So I kind of feel like, hey, if you're not going out and educating yourself and taking advantage of, you know, the access that we all have to this technology, it's on you, whatever the outcome may be.
For sure, for sure. And, you know, I think that it's very impressive for the people, even if this isn't super familiar to them, the people that realize this is kind of what is going on and the future of it, and the openness to try and learn or try and get involved, I think is big. You know, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who does ChatGPT, says, you know, there's no better time to go start a small business. Like for young people, there's been talk about how it's hard to kind of get jobs out of college these days. There's a lot going on with AI. You know, I think if you're kind of coming out of college, spending a lot of your time learning and understanding AI and following the top trends will leave you at advantageous position. So that's kind of my stance on it.
All the more reason I'm excited about Small Bay Flex. We just, my partner, I do another podcast called the Self Storage Report, where we do more of a news oriented. And we were just talking, I think, you know, unemployment for recent college graduates right now at 10%. Well, what are those folks going to do? They're going to start small businesses. That's been the tradition of the American economy. When there's a downturn in big businesses laying people off, those people start small businesses. We've seen a massive growth in small businesses over the last 40 years in our country, to some statistics like triple the number that existed in the 1980s. Only serves the thesis that you folks at Doors and Spaces are writing even better. That this trend is not going away in the near future. The days of everyone working for AT&T or Ford or Chrysler or one of the big companies, you know, those days are not really the reality of what's going on in the United States anymore.
Yeah, and you know, we think that next big that next big company, that next big invention, your next Apple, it's not going to come out of your garage. It's going to come out of a Small Bay Flex unit. So we're excited to see what's to come.
RJ Fischer, guys, if you are not following him on LinkedIn, you absolutely 100% should be. You can see his email down there. He's more than welcome to have a conversation with you about Small Bay Flex. His Small Bay Sundays are so educational on LinkedIn, so I strongly urge you to go and follow him there. We threw the link up earlier for the Small Bay Summit that's coming up in October. It's there again. My guy behind the scenes, Eric, is taking care of me as always. When you find a great person behind the scenes, never let them go. Eric is my fail-safe. Again, that's a teaser because the event sold out. Here's a tease for you, though. I will be there live, and I will be broadcasting the Stories Behind the Door podcast with various guests that are there, bringing them on live as they get an opportunity to do that. So if you can't make it to the event, you're going to be able to get some of the information that's going on there live from my podcast. That will be live on LinkedIn throughout the day, October 16th. I am going to give one more shout out to my good friends at Kiwi 2 Construction, Wayne Woosley and his team, the leaders in steel in the self-storage and small bay industrial flex space. Wayne has been erecting steel for over 30 years around the country. If you have any needs for your business, reach out to them. They are very easy to find. If you just Google Kiwi 2 Construction, you can go right to their website. My guy Eric behind the scenes, I told you he takes care of me, had the website up before I even thought about it. He's RJ Fischer, Director of Acquisitions for Doors and Spaces. I had so much fun today, I'm not going to lie. I usually do have fun doing my podcast, but it was really exciting to get to have you come on and talk about something that, quite frankly, we both geek out over. So RJ Fischer, thanks so much for joining me on this episode of the Stories Behind the Door podcast.
Thanks, Thaddeus. It's really a pleasure, and look forward to keep following along on the content that you're producing.
Appreciate you, my man. That's it for this week's episode. We'll see you guys live next week. Actually, I'll see you live tomorrow on LinkedIn. I have my guy Jordan Cater, a former wrestler at the University of Iowa, coming on live. And then look for Todd Shepard's YouTube video to come live tomorrow as well. Guys, that's it for this week. We'll see everybody soon.
Thanks, Thaddeus.
Thanks, RJ.